Hey everybody, it's Pete Toll again. Wanted to make a new video kind of highlighting some of the player position update suggestions that I have since 2K did a player position update last week and the first ratings update. So I wanted to go back through and just kind of touch on some of the ones that I think might be able to be changed overall. Looking at the Philadelphia 76ers, they did make the change of Isaiah Joe to the point guard position as his primary position. Um, I liked it at first, but now that we're getting into a more healthier esque lineup as far as the guard position with Milton coming back, um, I kind of feel like because Milton's going to play the point guard behind, he plays the point guard behind Maxi, can also shift to the shooting guard. And now Isaiah Joe's essentially, not a permanent fixture in the rotation. You could essentially move Isaiah Joe back to the two guard spot as his primary position, which then leads to Jaden Springer moving back to the point guard position, which then affects the overall. As you can see, it's weird this year. So they move if a player is at a shooting guard position and he has a good enough ball handling attributes and passing attributes, things like that. Moving them to point guard actually bumps them up in rating, whereas it used to bump them down. It used to be the opposite. You go from point guard to shooting guard and it increases them. Now, shooting guard to point guard with enough ball handling and passing increases them, which is different. But that's the only change I have there for the 76ers. The Milwaukee Bucks look okay to me. There's nothing else that they could really update as far as them. Chicago Bulls. The only one I would say, but I don't know that 2K that will really make the change right now, is Kobe White coming back from injury. More than likely will play the shooting guard position, but then what does that mean for Ayu Desumnu, who has played well in the backup role to Zach LaVine? There's no way that Kobe White's playing over Alex Caruso or Lonzo Ball, so his minutes are going to come at the two behind Zach LaVine for sure. Um, the Cavaliers are an interesting one because now you have Colin Sexton, who is essentially out for a good bit, depending on how the torn meniscus surgery goes. If he decides to go with the um, basically full repair of it, or they just cut a piece out and then repair it from there, it just affects the timeline. With the position changes, essentially what's going to happen here is I think Rubio will be the point guard. Kevin Pangos will get increased minutes as the backup. And Darius Garland will shift off the ball again, which I don't know that I love necessarily Garland back off the ball, but he'll essentially shift to the shooting guard position. Then what will happen is Sexton's out. If Okoro was healthy, I think Okoro would could essentially start if they wanted to keep Garland at point guard and Rubio in a backup role as a kind of a super sub. But what'll happen is I think you'll see guys like Dylan Windler get more playing time, Lamar Stevens get more playing time. Speaking of Lamar Stevens, he was playing a good bit of small forward because he plays the combo role. So you can kind of essentially say you could keep him as small forward. Dylan Windler has played shooting guard and small forward. I think he shifts back to shooting guard because he's playing ahead of Denzel Valentine right now. So Valentine is virtually getting no minutes. Dean Wade is actually playing small forward because Markkanen's hurt. Kevin Love essentially could play the backup center spot once he comes back healthy. which then puts Lamar Stevens back at the power forward because you have the depth of Mobley, Wade, and Stevens there. Then Markkanen comes back with Jetty Osman as the backup, and then that leaves however you want to break down the shooting guard position, whether it's Garland as shooting guard or Okoro comes in at shooting guard. So this actual roster is a little bit in flux right now until we figure out what's going to happen as far as the lineup without Colin Sexton in. One thing I would say, take off the secondary position for some of these guys that haven't played power forward in 4 years. Ed Davis. So it's just interesting that they always, kind of stick with them there. I personally wouldn't make the change of Marcus Smart back to shooting guard because I think once Jaylen Brown is healthy in another week or two, or relatively able to play games, I should say, because I don't think he's going to be fully healthy, he'll slide back at the shooting guard position. Josh Richardson's just been abysmal this year. I don't know how, if you had to pick a player that fell off the cliff faster than Josh Richardson from being, a wanted prospect to pretty much can't get in the rotation, it's definitely him. So, it's interesting there. The Clippers, they're another interesting team. Because they have varying positions here. Like Amir Coffey could play the 4. You've got Winslow here slotted at the 4 because he does play power forward, center, and point guard minutes. And so you could slot him in. Unfortunately, next gen consoles do not get the third position that the current gen copy of NBA 2K22 gets, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But either way, I think the Clippers, honestly, outside of figuring out here, like they have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George at small forward. The only problem I have with this is if you have an injury-free roster or you're playing my NBA, both these guys are at the same position. So if Kawhi Leonard was moved to the shooting guard position just for the sake of this season, just because Paul George is playing the small forward, then that alleviates that decision by the AI, the computer, to shift one of these guys, which it would be Paul George, to a 6-man role while still starting Reggie Jackson, when in reality that would never happen. But because the overalls matter so much in 2K, that's going to happen. So they need to move Kawhi Leonard, I think, to the shooting guard position. He's out for the season anyway. So really this is going to be a just for the menu purposes, things like that there. But that's just my personal take on it. The Grizzlies are another team that kind of slides positions around, specifically Kyle Anderson. Last night he played the small forward position with Brandon Clark coming in as the backup 4. Zaire Williams was out of the rotation. John Conchar plays the 2 this year. They did not switch him over in the player position update. Desmond Bain is the small forward. Dylan Brooks should essentially be the shooting guard right now, even though I think they did good in the sense that Brooks will play the small forward when they come back, and Bain will probably be the 2. That would be my guess. But just right now with Brooks out, I don't know, switching that position. Now, a caveat to that is 2K usually only switches player positions once, maybe twice a year. They usually switch the positions in the first ratings update of the year, and then not the update following the trade deadline. It's usually the ratings update following the trade deadline is when they finalize player positions for the year. So just keep that in mind. So some of these will probably switch throughout, but that's them. They moved Lou Williams to the shooting guard position. Lou Williams was in the rotation for 3 games in a row right at the time that they switched his position. He had moved in ahead of DeLon Wright, but as of last night's game, he was back out of the rotation. DeLon Wright was back in as the backup point guard there. So, I mean, you could say Williams is a combo. Like, I'm not going to worry too much about his position, but essentially you could move him back to point guard if you really wanted to, um, and call it a day. The Miami Heat, with Max Strus out, um, well, Caleb Martin was actually playing some small forward before that, but with Max Strus out, Caleb Martin is a small forward. And so could update his position. Let's see. Oh, there he is. And then one thing I was curious why 2K didn't do. So they moved Oladipo to the shooting guard and point guard position. He was originally a point guard shooting guard, but they didn't update Tyler Hero. So now you got Tyler Hero, Victor Oladipo, and Duncan Robinson all at the same position. Makes zero sense. Why not move Tyler Hero to the point guard and then his secondary shooting guard, because he does play a lot of point guard as a backup to Lowry, because he's definitely playing over Gabe Vincent, who's barely seen any time, and Marcus Garrett is a two-way G League guy. So it makes sense to move Tyler Hero to that point guard spot. You know, personally, that's the decision I would make if I was 2K. And then I did a video about some ratings changes I'd like to see. Can PJ Tucker and Markieff Morris see an increase, please? Like that one's a starter and the other one's playing, key rotation minutes, and yet there are 74 and 72 here, while you've got guys not in the rotation, at high overalls as well. Like Dwayne Dedmon's another one that could go up a point or two. So just my thoughts there on that. Looking at the Charlotte Hornets, they're pretty much okay. No changes. Really, 2K did a great job on this team. One thing, Vernon Carey Jr. has every chance in the world, and he just has not developed at all. I thought he'd at least be a low post guy that could score in the NBA, kind of like a not as good as Jahlil Okafor, but that offensive repertoire at the basket, be able to kind of turn and score. Give you at least 6 points a game or so, but he has just not developed. He didn't look good in the last G League game either, so it's kind of telling there. The Utah Jazz. So the Jazz, some lineups you think Bojan Bogdanovic is playing the power forward, and some lineups you think Royce O'Neal's playing it. I personally would move Royce O'Neal to the power forward. As you can see, it does not change his overall. And then Bogdanovic would move to the small forward, which does change his overall. He goes down a point, which definitely says that 2K updated the formula for shooting guards and small forwards this year, probably for all five positions. But who knows? I'd like to see maybe the real 2K insider John Markish. If I had any suggestion, and John, if you're watching, maybe if you have time, show the differences in the formula this year. What you have a chance to calculate everything. I know you're really good at figuring out formulas and what changed as far as changing positions this year. Definitely, the shooting guards kind of went worse for the wear, and then it looks like some of the positions, their strengths and weaknesses have changed. I don't know what areas essentially, but I know you probably would. The Sacramento Kings, interesting with them. It looks like everything's good here. They just didn't have the ratings adjustments that I thought they would. I thought Harkless should have went up considerably. He is a starter at small forward, but okay. The Knicks don't really have any position changes. They did good getting Wayne Selden playing the small forward. Kevin Knox playing the power forward spot. Not really playing at all. Miles McBride playing point guard, so they did well there. Lakers, they went ahead and made the change to Anthony Davis to center, LeBron at power forward, um, Bazemore at small forward, things like that. So glad to see that. They look okay to me. No real changes. They, of course, need ratings updates here. Everybody clamoring for Westbrook to go back up because of the triple doubles. Don't be deceived. Actually watch the games and see, an 84 is about right for him. Looking at Avery Bradley should go up a little bit. Bazemore should go up a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised if Carmelo Anthony goes up another point or so. Things like that. Now, the Orlando Magic are interesting because obviously Wendell Carter Jr. is a starter at power forward. But if you move him to power forward, then if Isaac comes back and Okiki comes back, you're kind of stuck there with a big glut at power forward. So that's why I think 2K didn't change it, because essentially Carter would be the starter with Bamba as the backup because they signed Robin Lopez to really be the veteran mentor, third string guy anyway. So, I think that change is not necessarily needed unless we find out that it's going to be another lost year for Jonathan Isaac. Then essentially, yes, you could move Carter to power forward and then figure that out there. The Dallas Mavericks, they look pretty good to me. Looks like Doncic is back on the ball. Brunson's in a backup role. They moved Sterling Brown to the shooting guard, Frank Ntilikina to the shooting guard, Tim Hardaway to the shooting guard, and then they moved up Reggie Bullock to the small forward. So Porzingis goes to the 4. Everything looks good here for the most part. Please, 2K, in the next ratings update, lower Moses Brown. He should not be a 77. Dwight Powell should be 77, 78 there. And then Brown should be under a 75 at least. He just does not play, and then he's a more or less I would still consider him a project that they're developing overall. The Brooklyn Nets, this one I had a little issue with, and I'll get to that in a second. But Durant essentially is a small forward here. You could make an argument that Durant should be the power forward, Bruce Brown be the small forward. But, I mean, in this case, I'm not going to gripe about who's the power forward, who's the small forward in the lineup because I don't see Kyrie playing this season at all, honestly. They moved Joe Harris to the shooting guard spot. DeAndre Bembry is at the small forward now. Everything else looks good except for Kyrie. You move James Harden to the point guard spot because he obviously is the primary playmaker, but you don't move Kyrie to the shooting guard spot. It makes no sense whatsoever. So same thing like Kawhi and Paul George. Now you have 2 point guards. Kyrie's not going to play. The computer does not know to shift Kyrie to the shooting guard spot on a computer-controlled team in my NBA. It's going to be Joe Harris there. Kyrie's going to be the 6th man, and then he's going to get traded throughout that my NBA if it's computer-controlled. Just doesn't make sense. Millsap here is a 78. There's no way that Millsap should be a 78 while Aldridge is a 79. Aldridge should go up, Millsap goes down. That's my ratings thing for the Brooklyn Nets. I try not to dive into ratings too much and have too many gripes because, that's, ratings are kind of subjective, but come on. Michael Porter Jr. here, small forward, I would say go down. That's the big change there. We're going to see how good the Nuggets are without Nikola Jokic after last night's shoving incident with Markieff Morris of the Miami Heat. He's definitely going to be suspended a number of games. I anticipate maybe 3 to 5 games based on that shove. And unfortunately, I don't think that the Denver Nuggets are going to be able to be very good without him. But we shall see. Vlatko Konchar moves back to the small forward spot. He played small forward since last season. Bobo moved to power forward center. A lot of lineups, he is the power forward. Some lineups, he's a center. And even big lineups, he plays the small forward spot. So good for 2K there to change that. Zeke Nnaji is essentially the center. Bobo plays the power forward just because he's more in the wing shooting threes and pull ups. They changed Jermichael Green to the center spot. He essentially plays back up to Nikola Jokic. So good change there. The Indiana Pacers had some changes. Torrey Craig is the backup power forward. Karis LeVert is the starting small forward. Chris Duarte's really emerged this year. I think a 79 was a little generous for him, but just my opinion. And then that's pretty much it for changes for them. Overall, the New Orleans Pelicans get interesting because they've been so hurt. The lineups kind of shift all over the place. Gary Temple has played small forward, power forward, and a little bit of shooting guard. Herb Jones has played small forward, power forward, and center. Najee Marshall's played small forward, power forward. Josh Hart's played small forward, power forward. Same with Brandon Ingram. Trey Murphy's played the 4 and the 3. So a lot of different positions here. I'll probably keep it as is for right now for the Pelicans. Maybe potentially move. Well, you got Ingram here. He essentially plays the power forward, but for game purposes, maybe move up Herb Jones to the power forward. And then that way you still have Ingram when in there at small forward with Josh Hart and Najee Marshall. You could make a case, for Gary Temple at the small forward spot if you really wanted to, but I'd probably keep him at shooting guard. The Detroit Pistons, they have Josh Jackson who plays multiple positions. He started at the 2. He's started at the 3 as well. So it's interesting there. Hamidou Diallo, small forward and shooting guard. They changed him to shooting guard and shifted up Josh Jackson in the last update. You could make a case either way. Honestly, with that, you could have kept Jackson at the 2 and Diallo at the 3, and it would have been fine. Isaiah Livers finally moves up to small forward from shooting guard. He also has power forward there. I think he's going to play more of the 3 than the 4 with the Pistons to start out, but we'll see what happens. Looking at the Toronto Raptors, they made some position changes here. It'll be interesting to watch Siakam coming back in the lineup if he is essentially the center full time, because they want to play Scotty Barnes at the power forward spot, and then you got Anunoby there at small forward. You could make a case that Anunoby's essentially the power forward and Barnes is the small forward. I mean, either way you want to look at it. But I think that's right with Barnes being the power forward and Anunoby being the small forward. They moved Svi Mikhailuk to the small forward. Delano Banton is essentially the backup point guard, even though they have him at shooting guard here. He has played a little shooting guard, so yeah, I'm not going to knock that, but I will knock that he did not even move in rating at all. Fred VanVleet should go at least to an 84 as well. I just feel like, those were warranted changes. So definitely keep an eye on Siakam moving to the center spot, and then going with that lineup. The Houston Rockets, don't know why in the world they didn't make the Christian Wood, Daniel Tice change. Tice should be the center. Wood should be the power forward. They did change House to power forward, which he's played backup minutes at this year. Essentially, Kevin Porter Jr. is the point guard, so that was a good change there. Garuba's played center for his more or less garbage time minutes. Would like to see that change as well. They changed Thad Young to backup center. All his lineups look like he's a small ball center. Doug McDermott, you can make a case. You could flip flop McDermott and Keldon Johnson because when McDermott was out, Johnson shifted up and Devin Vassell played small forward. So you can essentially switch Keldon Johnson and Doug McDermott in positions and be okay there. Looking at kind of the point guard position, the backup role, Lonnie Walker could essentially play the backup role, but I like leaving him at shooting guard because if there is a trade, they don't have to worry about changing that position back because, like I said, 2K is only going to change it once, maybe twice a year. Joe Wieskamp shifted up to small forward in the last update, and that's where he's been playing in the G League as well. Looking at the Phoenix Suns, they didn't have any changes except for Jalen Smith and Frank Kaminsky swapping spots. Kaminsky moves to the center spot here, and then Jalen Smith moves to power forward. I would have liked to have seen Dario Saric also move to power forward because I think that's long term where his minutes will come from, but they don't have to make the change since he's out for the year. The Oklahoma City Thunder, you can make a case Josh Giddey is a small forward at 6'8", and Lou Dort as 6'3" as a shooting guard. I mean, Giddey gets more assists, so I can see why he was left at the shooting guard position. But I personally, in my roster, I move him up to the small forward position. He moves up to an 80. Dort moves down to the shooting guard position. He goes down a point to a 77. They moved Pokashevsky to the power forward spot this year. I believe that's why he went up. Oh, no, he didn't. So Pokashevsky's more or less the backup power forward because Kendrick Williams is the backup small forward. So no real changes there unless you wanted to make that change with Dort and Josh Giddey. The Minnesota Timberwolves, they're interesting because last game they started a lineup of Pat Bev at point guard with D'Angelo Russell at the shooting guard position, and then Anthony Edwards shifted to the 3. They moved Taurean Prince back to the 4, and then you had Josh Okogie as a DMP. So that was interesting there. So kind of like if you shifted it around, Vanderbilt would be in the lineup. Then you have Edwards backed up by Jalen McDaniels is the 4 in the lineup, and then you could essentially keep either Prince at the 3 if you wanted to, because he only played one game, essentially starting at the 4, or Okogie, who plays a small ball 4 and the 3. So if you wanted to keep Prince there, this is kind of what it would look like. McDaniels and Vanderbilt essentially play there. Edwards and Prince there. Russell and Beasley. And then you've got Beverly. And then Russell's kind of the backup with Jordan McLaughlin out of the rotation. So that's kind of what you could do there with them. The Portland Trailblazers, they made some changes to theirs. Greg Brown is I think he was a power forward previously. I'll have to double check that, but CJ Ellaby moves to small forward. So that was a change they made there because Anthony Simons plays the 2 now. So Ellaby's minutes are essentially at the 3. The Golden State Warriors, they made some changes. Moses Moody was shifted to shooting guard. curiously, Andre Iguodala wasn't touched, but they did move Kuminga to the power forward spot. They didn't change Otto Porter. I personally would have had Otto Porter at the small forward position. You can make a case maybe Iguodala plays small forward, but I would have moved Porter to the small forward. Bielitsa moved to center, so that's good to see 2K make that correct change. Last but not least, the Washington Wizards. I don't know what's going on with 2K. I think it's because Rui Hachimura is a cover athlete. They do not want to make Rui Hachimura inactive, but yet they made Ben Simmons inactive for personal reasons and Kyrie inactive for personal reasons. I don't know why, other than being the cover athlete, and they don't want to ruffle feathers. Rui Hachimura just has not been inactive all season. It makes zero sense if you're going to go with a consistent manner of injuries and things like that. Like I noticed this morning's update already dropped, and they make campaign active, but you go over to the Cleveland Cavaliers and Colin Sexton is still active despite the torn meniscus. That makes zero sense to me. Like, it has to be consistent across the board, and that's constructive criticism on my part. I mean, I feel like if you're gonna change injuries, then change them all across the board. But that's just my personal opinion. The Washington Wizards, they did change Caldwell Pope to small forward and moved Kuzma up to power forward, which is correct. Isaiah Todd can shift between power forward and center. So that's, not bad changing him there. But this is just a quick video just highlighting those, some moves I would probably, or some positions I would probably update in the next update, but it'll be a while before they actually do that. But I just wanted to throw that out there in case any roster makers were curious of some changes they could make to even out the rosters more realistically. So hope everybody enjoyed this video. Please subscribe. Please like the video below. Comment on any positions that I may have missed across the board. Hope everybody has a great day, and thanks for watching.